Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Jakarta Tech Talk. My name is Irina, and joining us today are Ed Burns and Arjan Tijms, who will be presenting on the topic of Jakarta EE 11, what's new and why you should care. If you have any questions for Ed and Arjan as we move forward through today's presentation, feel free to ask them in the chat or use Ask the Question tab. Ed and Arjan, over to you.
Hello, thanks, Irina, and hello, everyone, and I'm glad you're joining us today. We'll get started by introducing myself, and then Arjan will introduce himself. I've been doing this, working on Jakarta EE technologies and software development for a very long time. I've been very blessed to have a long relationship with Arjan, collaborating on the JSF implementation back in the early part of the century. And now I'm working in the cloud and working on AI at Microsoft. And along the way there, I've written a few books. You can see those, and you can find me all over the place. Just my handle is @EdBurns on all of the things.
All right, so my name is Arjan Tijms. I've indeed been working with Ed for like a very long time. I started using Java and J2EE back in the days in 2003-ish, 2004, something like that, with the, I think it was the Orion server back then, like very old thing. So I've been using that ever since Jakarta EE and Java in my professional career. So I contributed a lot to various Java EE, now Jakarta EE specs, mostly JSF at the days. Then I moved into security a bit, and security and the specs related to it, like authentication, authorization, are still my main targets. Since Jakarta or Java EE moved over to the Eclipse Foundation, I've been mostly involved with Glasswiz and with a server called, or server runtime called Piranha. I'll talk about it a little bit later. I have my own company with two co-founders. It's called Omnifish, where we support Jakarta EE in general, and specifically Glasswiz and Piranha. And just like Ed, I've written a couple of books too on CDI, JSF, and security.
Okay, so thank you for joining us. This is our plan for your time investment. We recognize you have a lot of things you would need to do in your day, and we're very grateful that you chose to spend some time with us. Every story needs to have a beginning and a middle and an end, and I am going to talk about first Jakarta EE at a glance. In the middle, Arjan and I will share some slides on technical details on what's new. At the end, we'll have the summary and call to action and resources. And we have, let me start my timer. Sorry about that. We have some time blocked out for Q&A at the end. Also, we do have a chat, so please put your comments in the chat, and Irina will bring those to our attention as appropriate. Also, I want to give a special thanks to my colleague and also longtime collaborator, Reza Rahman. He is the one who gave us the slides on which we based this. We added some content to it, but Reza was a great start. And Reza is open to work right now. So if you have some positions and you need a Java EE expert or overall cloud expert, please do check out Reza's LinkedIn. With that said, let's jump in. This is the overall view. This is our one and only history slide. And Jakarta EE has been around for over 20 years now, maybe more like 25, although it has had a number of different names during that time. Started out as the IBM San Francisco project, then became J2EE, then became Java EE, and then transitioned from JCP to the Eclipse Foundation. The value of Jakarta EE is numerous. There's many different dimensions to it. But as far as Eclipse goes, the value is this open governance, open source, and open compatibility testing thing. It's different from a pure open source project, whereas it's open standards that can be backed by either proprietary or open source implementations. We'll have a slide later that shows the overall ecosystem of all of the products from Spring to WebLogic to whatever, and how they relate to Jakarta EE. But the thing that ties it all together is this governance model where you as a developer can get involved and participate not just as a consumer of the technology, but also as a director of the technology. This is a great thing for you as a developer because it can help you drive your career forward. Because if you look at the progression of your career, moving from just a plain old user to one who defines the technology is a really valuable career skill. And I think that is something that we have as an edge when compared to other enterprise Java stacks. Also, as it turns out, in the world of AI, the act of writing specifications is how software will be done now and in the future, with LLMs that are able to generate software based on a specification. So having well-defined specifications is actually a real big benefit in working with artificial intelligence, and everything that we do in Jakarta EE is fully specified and has a open testing thing, which Arjan will talk about, and that was one of the big features in Jakarta EE 11. Another key part of the value proposition is that we have broad industry support. So Oracle, IBM, Piranha, Red Hat, all of these vendors are stakeholders in Jakarta EE, providing implementations and support. And it gives you the trust to depend on what we're doing with Jakarta EE. And at the bottom, community participation and contribution are really key to what we're doing here. I couldn't, like, Arjan came to the project initially as a community contributor. There have been numerous examples of people contributing things that became part of the core Jakarta EE specification. For example, facelets came into Jakarta EE as an open source project, and there's been numerous other things. Here's a bit of the numbers on the importance of Jakarta EE over the years. The source of this is the Jakarta Developer Survey. That's a wrong link. I mean, the link is fine, but it should say 2024, not 2025. The link is correct, though. Let's just test it. I'll click on it. Make sure it's there. Yes, continue to destination. So this is the PDF of the report from 2024. Yes, there it is. So it's the 2024 report, not 2025. But the link is correct. And that just shows you can get 70 to 80% of Java applications depend at least on one or more Jakarta EE APIs. And it's showing the penetrations of the different runtimes. And the purpose of this slide is to really show you that you can have confidence in what we're doing because other developers are picking it as well. So the survey has the full set of data that you can get the key takeaways from. So I do encourage you to read them. Okay. Do you see the slide still? Can I have a check? Because my screen just changed a bit. Okay, great. So this is that Java products and specifications. So on the top here, we have three different boxes. Older cloud native technologies, not at all cloud native technologies, and newer cloud native technologies. And with those three categories, we have a number of dependencies on all of the Jakarta EE specifications here, broken up into the core profile and the platform and the web profile. But also, people certainly know about Tomcat, Jetty, and Undertow. This is kind of an official thing that I call the Spring/Tomcat profile, which is just servlet and pages, EL, WebSocket authorization, and annotations. And then aside from that, we also have the set of specifications that are micro profile. So these are all open standards done in Eclipse in one way or another. And you can see that Spring depends heavily on the Spring/Tomcat profile. WebLogic depends on overall Jakarta EE profile. Also, WebSphere Traditional does. And then the newer cloud native things depend on Jakarta EE, but also on some subset of the microprofile specifications. So up here, this is where the new cloud native action is happening. And the dark blue is either open source or proprietary things, and the lighter blue is all open source that may or may not have a proprietary downstream. So both Quarkus and Helidon are open source, but WebSphere, Liberty, and JBoss EAP are proprietary, but each of them have an open source upstream, Open Liberty and Wildfly. In addition, we have Piranha and Glassfish, and Arjan will be talking about what Piranha is next, but I want to just click on this link here, a note on Spring and Jakarta EE, and this will take us to the latest Spring docs, and it does tell you the history of Spring and the Spring framework, and this is the official position statement of Spring. So you can see they are using a pretty significant number of Jakarta EE specifications. And if you look over the history of the Spring version releases, you'll notice that they track one for one with Jakarta EE releases. So we just released EE 11 a couple months ago, and we expect there will be a Spring release that follows on and picks up those specifications as well. Okay. Oops, let me go back to this. There we go. All right, I'll let Arjan talk about this new exciting announcement that was relatively recent.
Right, thank you, Ed. So yeah, I'm talking a bit about Eclipse Piranha Cloud. So Piranha Cloud is a runtime that has existed for some time, was worked on by Manfred Riem. We talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But Eclipse Piranha Cloud just recently moved over to the Eclipse Foundation. It was before a separate project. Now it joins the likes of Glassfish, Mahara, Soteria, Jersey, and what have you. So one of the specific things of Piranha Cloud is that its target, its aim, is to build an entire Jakarta EE implementation, while not necessarily or not at all being a application server. So for a long time we have Jakarta being tied to the idea of an application server, but actually in the specs it doesn't really says that that has to be specifically the case. So things like servlet, things like the CDI, nothing there ties it to the concept of an application server. Piranha Cloud indeed tries to prove that. We are already quite far. There's a couple of components that we don't have yet, but we are quite on our way to implement a full Jakarta EE profile. So maybe you can show the next slide, Ed. So, like I said, this project was started by Manfred Riem. He's also a colleague, a former colleague, oh no, still a colleague again.
Yep,
Ed.
I work with Manfred all the time. Yep.
Yes, so he was the JSF co-spec lead. He also started as a Mahara contributor, just like me, contributing bits and pieces, and got more involved over time. He was the lead of the MVC specification, and of course an all-around general EE expert. So we've been working together with him on this project, Piranha Cloud, for quite some time. So one of the other specific things about Piranha Cloud is that we implemented the servlet container from scratch. So next to Undertow, Jerry, and Tomcat, it's a complete servlet container, completely from scratch, and also built to be like extremely modular. So that's the entire concept of Piranha. Everything can be removed or composed. Features within modules can be removed as well. So for our servlet container, if you need a very simple HTTP, almost like response engine, you don't need sessions, you don't need context, so that can be removed. So everything is quite composable there. Of course, at the same time, we're also working on the Glassfish server. So maybe question comes up, what's the difference between Piranha Cloud and Glassfish? So Glassfish is, of course, the traditional but highly modernized application server. It's all the features that you would expect in an application server, monitoring, deployments, undeployments, auditing, running multiple applications, and what have you. Piranha is the opposite. It's a bit like Quarkus and Helidon in that it's not an application server but a runtime. So you use it more as a library. You can also highly embed it in your code. So, for instance, if you want to render a JSF page as a string, so you're essentially using JSF as a templating language, you can just do so from within your Java code. So you send string to Piranha. You don't start it up, but you use it as a library. There's no HTTP server running. You directly invoke the Piranha server engine, and it will give you back the rendered string that JSF would otherwise send to the response. And then you can use this to send an email or store it in your database, send it to a file, what have you. So the overlap between Piranha and Glassfish that they do all use the same implementation component. So for CDI we use Weld, Jakarta REST is Jersey, Jakarta Persist is Eclipse Link, Security, Soteria. This is by design, it's to target the goal of the project to share those components. Of course, it doesn't have to because it's highly modular. You could use Hibernate or REST Easy if you wanted to, but the product itself, it's quite clearly focuses on having the same number of components and the same implementations of them. Of course, the servlet engine I mentioned was different. So they do have their own servlet engine. Glassfish is based on a Tomcat web variant, and Piranha on its own. And for the future, we do look at something to replace EGB with, and then we try to make something like an annotation mapper for Piranha, that we don't have to insert a complete container for EGB, but otherwise they are quite the same.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to pop up this need to move on thing. There's because we only have an hour, so we have a lot of slides to get through. So if you see the spotlight come up, Arjan, that's my cue. Next up, Reza has also been very instrumental in the Jakarta EE Ambassadors program, and I do want to bring to your attention the guide to contributing to Jakarta EE 11 that Reza and the ambassadors have built. So please take a look at that if you want to get more involved, and that's a great resource. Okay, let's jump into the next section, technical details on what's new.
Okay,
go ahead,
let's
Arjan.
talk a bit about Jakarta EE 11 in context. So we have several main themes, main things to do. The long-lasting one is the CDI alignment. This was actually proposed by Reza Rahman a long time ago, 2012-ish, to essentially replace all functionality that we have in Jakarta by CDI equivalent. So it's not that CDI itself will implement those things. It will be other APIs, other specifications like concurrency, security, persistence even, that will implement features that build on CDI. So you could use them in all your CDI applications and with your CDI beans.
And so the importance of this thread is that you can look at how Jakarta has evolved over the decades, and CDI is, something that was invented after a few versions of Jakarta EE or J2EE happened, and it's really the fundamental object model for everything. And so it's taken many years of refinement and many different releases of Jakarta to have the CDI technology pervade through everything. It needs to be taken as a common assumption that it is there and usable. But because there's so many, remember that graph with all the different products depending on things, introducing a cross-cutting concern like CDI and saying, yes, this is going to be the one and only object model has taken a number of years. So Arjan can talk about why that is, but it's just something I want to point out that's comes with having a long-lasting technology that is maintained very carefully by the stewards of Jakarta EE.
Yes, exactly what Ed says. So we have a number of technologies, for instance, transactions, JTA before, persistence, JPA, they were heavily used outside Jakarta, outside Java EE. So we have to be very careful to make that depend on CDI. Of course, within the platform, a bit like Spring does too, and some other platforms do that. We want everything to be CDI. That would like eat our own dog food, provide our own B model as a first-class citizen. So that would be relatively easy to do, you would think. But as Ed points out, at the same time, we have to be very aware that it's not just our own ecosystem. It's not just the Jakarta. JPA is used a lot in Spring. JTA is used in other projects too. So we can't just say, okay, it now depends on CDI. Everything is a CDI bin and be done with it. We need to evolve that very carefully. Nevertheless, a number of the annotations that you see there, they're all going to be provided in a CDI variant. So we have shed shell that has more or less been done. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Lock and max concurrency is things that will be done in EE12. Roles allowed, the same. We have been looking at that for some time. It's somewhat available for Jakarta REST beans via the macro profile. Macro profile is, of course, not yet part of Jakarta EE. Otherwise, roles allowed is specifically for servlets, for EGB beans, and not for other types of artifacts like servlets. But we're working on that quite a bit, and in EE12, we hope to make a major step to continue with that. So the other things we did in this context will not go through everything, but the Java SE alignment, of course, like new features come into Java, so we need to take advantage of them in newer Jakarta versions. So we have some standardization gaps that we looked at. JWT was an obvious thing. It's in macro profile now, and we wanted to somehow incorporate that in Jakarta as well. It's a long story. I'll talk a bit more about it later. And of course, a quite important thing is that we had to remove a couple of things. So Jakarta became bigger and bigger, as I think a lot of people know. So we do, from time to time, have to go through the specs and see what's not relevant to be in the platform anymore. It doesn't mean those things are totally gone. So like JXWS, JXB, Corba, they still exist as standalone specs. They're not part of the platform release anymore. It's not mandatory to implement them by vendors, but servers like LastVis, WebSphere, Liberty, maybe, they still provide implementations of that.
Yes, and that's important to bring out because if it's not in the spec, but it was in the past, then vendors have the decision of continuing to support it, but they don't have to. They can still call themselves Jakarta EE. And this is important because it allows us to bring new vendors in that, like, for example, Piranha and hopefully others, and they don't have to implement these things that are not required. So if you don't have a history of supporting customers with Corba, then you're not going to just go after that market because no one really is inventing greenfield applications that depend on Corba anymore. And even true with EJB. But there are plenty of customers that have very important mission critical applications that are generating revenue and still are important to maintain that are using absolutely these older things. So just because it's not in the standard anymore doesn't mean that it will be dropped from commercial support. That's certainly not true.
Yeah, so that's the case. And we have to great care to preserve those specifications. They're not deleted, they're not obsoleted, they're not removed anywhere. They're just still there, and vendors can still work on them. They can even evolve them if they want. Yeah. They're simply not part of the mandatory profiles anymore.
Okay, so let's talk about the themes that we were doing with Jakarta EE. These are, when we kick off a new release of Jakarta, we decide what are going to be the themes, and we have a release plan that's part of the Eclipse process that states this is what we intend to do. And we continually evolve that as work proceeds. What we planned was to do Java SE in 21 as the baseline, adapting to key changes. We picked up only a few of the features. They have to make sense for specifications to want to use these new things, and we'll talk about what those are. We did update significantly persistence, concurrency, security, CDI, and validation. And we did add, for the first time since Jakarta EE became donated from Oracle, a brand new, net new specification, Jakarta Data. Now, I say it's brand new, but the ideas are very old. And in keeping with what a standard should be, a standard should not innovate. A standard should standardize existing best practice. So in the case of Jakarta Data, it took the repository pattern that was really innovated by Spring Data. So you can see that we are able to pull from Spring, and Spring is able to pull from Jakarta. So it's a good symbiosis ecosystem for enterprise Java. And for our perspective in Jakarta, we want to keep the developer in the driver's seat and allow people to have that continued freedom to build their careers and direct the technology, not just letting the vendors decide what things should be. I also am going to hand it to Arjan to talk about this modernized TCK, but I want to state before we do, this is the biggest technical debt paydown in Java EE history. The TCK is a key part of Jakarta EE and Java EE and J2EE before it, and it is what allows vendors to declare that they are compatible with the implementation. It's a super important thing. And when the initial Java was open sourced, the TCK was one of the sticking points about, hey, this thing needs to be still put out there in the open source. Well, for Java EE and Jakarta EE, it finally is. So the TCK is 100% open source, and we received a very, detailed and difficult to produce donation of IP from Oracle, thanks to Ed Bradford that years ago. But the TCK, even though it was open, it was still based on this very old testing technology called Java Test. It's so old that it predates even JUnit. It predates the concept of unit testing, really. Like Kent Beck was doing his brand new thing with unit testing when Java Test was first done. And we, for many, many years in Jakarta EE, had tried to modernize it and take these old things and put them on the newer technologies like JUnit and Arquillian. And we finally said, no, the buck stops here with 11. And we took a full extra calendar year on the schedule to get it all done. So I want to thank the team completely for doing that. And I also want to thank the Eclipse project for having the patience and the Jakarta working group for having the patience to let us get this done, because it's a problem that just kept getting kicked down the road. And we said, now the buck stops here. We're going to do it in EE11. So Ari, you can maybe tell us a little bit more about the technical details of that.
Yeah, so Ed already mentioned the most important thing is that the TCK was before based on Java Test and so it was not only very obscure to work with, it was also very slow. All of the projects that we had within the TCK, they were like just files in folders, so your IDE would not really recognize them. It was hard to import, hard to compile, hard to build, specifically hard to run, because like the entire TCK was essentially one big ball, and in this case it was like one big ball of mud, because it was so unclear what things were doing. If you would, for instance, maybe you wanted to run the expression language TCK, but it was part of the entire TCK as one of the many tests, so you would have to set up things like a mail server, a second EGB server, because the EGB tests required that. You had to set up a database, all of those things that were not needed by expression language, just in order to start running and get to the expression language tests. So besides just moving the technology from Java Test to JUnit into a Maven project, so you could actually have the code of your IDE be recognizable, coded, to call references, inspections, what have you. This also entailed splitting up the TCK in a lot of standalone versions of them, which were taken to the individual projects. So instead of, for instance, the servlet tests being like all in the platform TCK, the servlet tests were extracted from that and moved to the servlet project. Same with the Jakarta Security tests. They were extracted and brought to the Jakarta Security project, etc. So now it's much easier. There's much less setup to be done to run each individual TCK. It's also much easier to run them in parallel as a vendor if you want to run them all. And because you don't see all the complexity within the project, that's not related to a specific set of tests. For instance, if you look at the servlet test, you don't want to see everything to do with EGB or with SOAP or with JAX WS, what have you. It's much easier to contribute to that because your radar at that point, your vision is only the servlet test. So it's only the expression language test. So that makes it much more manageable. Combined with the fact, of course, that we have now simply the standard unit 5, Archillian, and Maven. So this makes it much more approachable to developers. And
all right,
yeah, that's basically what we did. We spent a year basically refactoring it. We automated a bit that using Open Rewrite, but still, after the scripts had run, which we had to develop ourselves, there were no available scripts for that. A lot of tests still had to be done and fixed manually by hand. But I think it was like really worth it. It's so much better now.
Good. All right, let's go now. We have 30, we're half past, we have 20 minutes left, so let's pick up the pace a bit. This is one of the, if you've been attending to Jakarta EE presentations over the years, you're always going to see graphs like this. The blue is updated, the orange is net new, and the gray is not updated. And you can also see how we've laid this out in the 3 different profiles. The profiles are lineups of specifications. And it's important to note that they don't depend on each other. We technically, the POMs will have a dependency, but their real intent is for each of the profiles to be its own lineup of things. They are technically supersets and subsets of each other, but there isn't really a dependency on it, functionally speaking. Now we're in the middle section, so let's dive into technical details on what's new. And I'll ask Arjan, please keep in mind that we have only 20 minutes left before we need to do Q&A.
Yeah, so we go a bit quickly through this. Jakarta Persistence, worked on by Kevin King, the original designer. He came back to Jakarta EE. So, Kevin, if you're seeing this, like, great, absolutely great to have you back. The guys did so many things. I will just quickly go through a few highlights. So the Java SE records that we can use as embeddable classes is a new feature. Records are great in Java SE, but we can't use them as entities. Entities are they're required to be mutable. States need to be tracked, so that's why records are not for entities. Maybe in the future the guys will make up like a something like a projection of the data, and then they can be entities. But now this is not the case. We also aligned with CDI, so we'll go down a few things to the @inject. So entity managers can be injected by the @inject, and they will have a scope, and they can have qualifiers. So there's a lot of more changes. There were like 4 or 5 of these slides full of changes. You need to look for themselves. I will not go through all of them. Okay, so it's a quick example of the embeddable records. So embeddables can be used as records, but entities cannot.
Right. So what you do is you have to declare your record embeddable, and then you can use it in an entity.
Yes.
So while it's true that you can't have a record be an entity, you can certainly use it. So that really does give you most of the flexibility you need.
Yeah, so this is an example of how to define an entity manager that you can inject later. So if you don't do anything, the default entity manager, which corresponds to the default data source and the default persistence unit, if there is only one, can always be injected. So you don't need to do anything specific here. You can give it a scope, or you can give it a qualifier. So if you define your own qualifier, like my production database or my test database. There's another element not shown here. It's called the simply qualifier. And you can add that to the persistent XML. And then if you inject it, you can use that with the injection point.
Okay, so concurrency is another one of the important specifications. And we did, one of the big things in Java SE21 was virtual threads, an amazing, important throughput innovation in the Java platform. And one of the core things we're doing with Jakarta as we evolve over the years is make sure the amazing innovation that George Saab's team is doing at Oracle makes it into the hands of Java developers, regardless of what vendor. So any vendor you pick, if it's a Jakarta EE compatible vendor, you're eventually going to get the new features. Virtual threads is one of those. It is mostly an implementation level concern for runtimes. However, it is something that can surface in the sense of when you have a managed executor, you can specify virtual equals true. And if you are on Java SE21 and you say virtual true, then you get a virtual thread. If you're on Java 17 and you say virtual true, you get a platform thread. So that's how we did this. The runtime itself is aware of what version level you're on, and then it will do the right thing, and it's kind of transparent. You just get a better performance when you're running on the newer version. So it's the classic case of it's generally a good idea to stay up to date with your most recent Java version. And I actually, if you want to catch me up during the Q&A, Microsoft does have an excellent tool called the App Modernization Upgrade for Java, and it will have support for automatically using AI, migrating your code forward to using the latest version of Java. So really, there's no excuse. You can't say, oh, it takes too long, it's too risky. We have AI to the rescue for that. So please talk about that. I'll be giving that as conference talks I did during Java Land last year. I'll be doing the same thing going forward.
Okay, that sounds like a very interesting tool. I think people should all check that out.
Cool,
okay, so let's get to the shed shell in CDI bean. So this relates to the story where we want to provide CDI-based functionality within the Jakarta platform based on EGB features, so that you don't have to use EGB anymore for certain things. In this case, it's the shed shell annotation known from EGB. We didn't exactly do the shed shell in the sense that you annotate the bean gets picked up at runtime and shed shelled. That will be in EE12, but we did for EE11. It's a small step towards this. So you basically get all the functionality minus the automatic scanning of the beans. So what you need to do here, you annotate your method with asynchronous, the well-known annotation from Jakarta transactions, and statutory from Jakarta concurrency. And then you use this new attribute, which is also an annotation at shed shell. And when you make the call to this method, then the call will be handled according to the shed shell. So if the shed shell says you will do it once in the future, then this call will not happen immediately, but it will take place in the future. Or if it has a repeating cron expression, then it will repeat. So this gets you quite far compared to the EGB feature, but you do have to call the method yourself, which can be a bit surprising if you go from EGB. Otherwise, it has the same features. Okay, Jakarta Security. So we basically had this issue that Jakarta Security wanted to adopt JWT.
That's JSON Web Token.
Yeah, the JSON Web Token, well known in cloud environments. JWT was on the radar for Jakarta Security for a long time, but it wasn't done yet. In the meantime, MicroProfile picked this up, especially during the days that Jakarta EE wasn't fully transferred yet, so we could not add new features to it. So I myself contributed to JWT in MicroProfile as well. But we're now with the situation that JWT is in MicroProfile. We have Jakarta Security. They somehow need to work together. Most servers implement both MicroProfile and Jakarta EE So what do you do? So we came up with an alignment process, an alignment spec actually that we're working on. It's not yet there. So there's also at the same time a process going that microprofile might merge with Jakarta EE. So this thing has not been entirely ready yet. It's mentioned here because we did work on it, but it's not done. And we have to see how to proceed with this in the future. Meanwhile, in various servers, like for instance, Glasswiz and Piara, the JWT feature for microprofile is fully adopted already as a Jakarta Security authentication mechanism. So there it's already what this profile would do in the future. So two other small features that we did is we added features to handle multiple authentication mechanisms within the same application. So historically, you always had one framework provided authentication mechanism like Form or Basic or indeed JWT. You could not have multiple ones. So sometimes you want multiple ones. So you would try JWT first. Would it fail, you would fall back to Basic, or you would have like within the same app a UI part and then REST part, and then REST would use JWT, for example, and the UI part would use good old Form. So you could not do that before. You can do that now. It's slightly low level, so it's basically a step towards it. You can do this programmatically.
We have an example for that in the code? We do, right? No?
Not yet here, no.
No, we don't.
So
okay.
There's an example for this in the TCK, which has been written to be an example too. But we do need to work a bit on the examples there, but it's intended more for the more advanced user. You do it programmatically, you inject two authentication mechanisms in a so-called handler, and then the handler can, based on some condition, use one or the other, or you can use even 5 or 6 if you want, but it's all done programmatically. But this handler thing is kind of like an interceptor. It's been known from the identity mechanism, for the identity store handler, but you can also direct to multiple stores, and here you can direct to multiple authentication mechanisms.
Okay, let's move on.
So, yeah.
Because we got 7 minutes left.
Yeah, okay, so let's move on to the next one. So I talked about this one here already, so this one can be skipped. Quick about authorization. It depended on the Java SE policy, but the policy is going to be removed with the removal of the security manager, which is stated to be removed at some point in the future. It's now permanently disabled, but it will completely be removed. So Jakarta had to do something there. So we kind of made their own policy. This does have the advantage that the policy can be installed per application. So with the old system, it was a Java SE VM,
right?
Yeah, and that's not so handy for application servers which run multiple applications. It was always like a system thing. It's now per application thing.
That's great.
Okay, so I can move to the next slide there. Give a small example of this, not too detailed. So, for instance, suppose you have the well-known roles allowed foo as some method. Then what you can essentially do, you can programmatically intercept the resolution of this authorization decision. So in this example, there's the implies method. It's part of a policy class that I don't show here. And then you can programmatically do something with this authorization request for foo. So in this case, you check, okay, is the role being queried indeed foo? And then you would do programmatically check that the role foo would only be applied during working hours. This is something you can't do with the annotation, but you can do this programmatically. Cool. If it's not the case, you just direct to the original policy.
Right.
Okay, now a small example for the in-memory identity store. If you want to set up a test, you can quickly create some users for your test application.
All right, now we get to the big new thing, Jakarta Data 1.0.
Yeah, so Jakarta Data, also for the sake of time, let's not go into that too deep. It builds on the repository idea. So it's built on Jakarta persistence in a way, although not necessarily. So it's rather quiet where it directs to. So vendors can still choose: do I use Jakarta persistence? Do I use JNoSQL? Or do I use something proprietary? But it is typically in Jakarta built on Jakarta persistence. So it adds these things like repositories where you have like an easy access to your data in a way that holds your data together. You have the well-known methods that encode the query, basically, but that's of course a bit limited, and you should not put too much there because your query is your method name. Can be quite handy for small things, not so handy for bigger things, of course. So paired with this is like an annotation that holds that can hold a query, and then your query for your repository access can be a bit more elaborate. Okay, so small example here. Maybe for the sake of time, let's not go too deep into that, but it shows that you can have a repository where you, in this case, you use a query to get the data, and then not a encoding within the method name. And yeah, so this is the example.
Right. So we have both, right? This is the query by method name, and this is the query by using the query language, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the naming is important. So find by name contains, those are operations that are derived by the English language meaning of those words. So it's nice for easy examples, but you can, when you have more complexity, then you're able to do this. In JSF world, we used to call this the pay-as-you-go complexity tax, which is you shouldn't have to learn something hard unless you actually need it. So in the case of querying, most of the time you can get by with just a simple name thing, but you need to be able to scale to more complex cases. So it's the, simple things should be simple and complex things should be possible.
Yeah, that's exactly the case here. The query language, which is mentioned over there.
Yeah, and for 12, we're going to be trying, this will be a separate specification.
Yeah, that will be indeed a separate spec. So the query language that you see is a subset of the Jakarta persistence query language. It's a simpler one. You still need to learn it, of course. It's now part of the Jakarta Data spec, but this will be its own spec. Special for this year in Jakarta Data is that it's not necessarily directed to be checked at runtime. So a compiler or a big build tool can actually check this thing too. So it's not just a string, it's actually quite type safe.
Yeah.
If you use it with the build tools. Okay, so we have some general changes. So the records are supported in various specs throughout the platform. So Jakarta validation, CDI in a special language. Jakarta validation, essentially the implementations had support for this already. It was not mandated. It's now is mandated. But if you use, for example, Hibernate Validation 8, which is a couple of years old, it should still work. But now it's guaranteed to work. And if there's other implementations, you're sure that it will work as well. So goes to remove some things like the add manage bean annotation. So this has a long history in a way. It's the this will not go into this too deep, but at some point we had the idea that there was a super type of all managed artifacts within Jakarta. So EGBs, servlets, JAX resources, CDI beans, JSF beans, they all would have a common super bean type. Basically just supporting simple injection and add post construct. But in practice, this never really took off. So CDI beans, which were basically a subtype of the managed bean, they became the bean. So then we did not need the super type anymore. It was holding us up And so for the sake of cleaning the platform, making it more lean and agile, we removed this. And yeah, things are smaller things, and that's super important.
Right. Okay, so we did talk about records in Jakarta validation.
Yeah, so you can now validate records as well. So this is an example of how to do that.
Yeah, that's a great
feature. Essentially, wherever you use this record, check that the manufacturer in this case is not blank, so it should not be the empty string, it should not be null, and the same for the other attribute strings shown there.
Yep. Okay, finally, we're coming back to our summary. We're a little bit late, but I think we'll just breeze through this. What Jakarta does is beyond specification work as well. The individual custom and the individual projects that compose Jakarta EE are free to make their own websites for key Jakarta EE technologies. So CDI and Bean Validation have their own spec websites. Does Persistence have one?
Not too sure. Don't think so. Okay. Not every project has one.
Right. Yeah, because that would get too crazy if it did. But the key ones are there. We have a large number of Jakarta examples that help you get up to speed for most use cases. Then we have the comprehensive end-to-end Jakarta EE tutorial. This is something where we really could use some help in improving that. Because
absolutely,
we're kind of resource starved, where we have one group of people that are inventing the stuff, but we don't have another separate group of people who is writing the tutorial for how to use the stuff. So exactly. Many times
a bit of the same people. Like I've been doing the security chapter for the Jakarta EE tutorial, but I was also the main person behind the spec.
Yep. There is the Jakarta EE starter. This is where you go. I'll just click on this real quick. It just shows you what version you want to use. Note the EE11 is here now. And we actually need to update the starter to have platform and web. So that's some job to be done. If we go back to 10, you'll notice they have all three of these things. Actually, no, only two. How far do you have to go back to get platform? Oh, well, we need help. Go back to 8 at least. No, or it's not a platform verse. We'll produce a Docker file or not. And you can you can choose what runtime you want to use. I guess Piranha will be in here too, perhaps.
Yeah, it should be there at some point.
Yep. And thanks to Spring for giving us this idea of having a starter. I remember start.spring.io was revolutionary, and we said, yeah, we need that too. And then we have the cargo tracker end-to-end application design, and there is ways to run that in the cloud as well. I won't dive into that. Now, ways to contribute. You can follow Jakarta technologies that interest you and share your opinion on our mailing lists. You could advocate for specific project changes to get involved. If you want to get really involved, you would sign the Eclipse contributor agreement, and then you're able to have your pull requests merged. That's an important thing. And eventually become a contributor. Or you can ask for help for some Jakarta ambassadors. To summarize, Jakarta is the first spec release since Java EE to have a net new specification. It included the largest technical debt pay down in the 25-year history of this journey. It's the new TCK. And summary, bottom line is open standard specifications are still alive and well. So thank you for your attention. And Arina, if we have any questions, we could have 5 minutes to answer them.
Thank you so much, Ed and Arjan, for your excellent presentation. So just
you're welcome.
Everyone in the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat or at the Q&A tab. So let me have a look if we have anything at the moment. So I see we have no questions right now. I think we can give a few seconds. Okay, we just got one question. Let me put it on the screen. So can you talk about, I'm not sure if it's umbrella jars and the elimination of them? Sorry if I pronounced it wrong.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Can you cover that one, Arjan?
Umbrella jars. I think it comes from Lenny. So what do you exactly mean by that?
Well, we used to produce umbrella jars for everything.
Yeah, I think Lenny asked about the spec jars. So we had like one big jar that you would depend on in Jakarta EE10. So those have been split out now to independent ones. So that it becomes easier to just depend on a single spec and not on the entire umbrella. It's also much easier with dependencies. So before the umbrella jar, and I think that then he means that for the Jakarta EE platform or the Jakarta EE web profile was essentially like a merged jar with all the specifications instead out of that. And this would not play well if you also had dependencies aside, like individual dependencies on JSF or on JPA, now called Jakarta Faces and Jakarta Persistence. Then that would kind of clash because Maven, for instance, or Gradle would not see that those things were actually the same thing, but just in the different coordinates.
Okay. Let's see if we have any more questions. Not yet. Let's give a few more seconds, maybe if there is one last question popping up for now.
Yeah, then we can see if somebody wants to pick that up.
It doesn't look like there are any more questions, but there are some really nice comments about the presentation. So thank you so much once again, Arjan and Ed. And I wish everyone a great day. And I hope to see you both again at the next webinar.
Oh, I have a question. Will the recording be available?
Yes, of course, it will be.
Okay. Very good.
So thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you so much.